Hello everyone, and welcome back to Media.wmv's Dublin Bay South by-election interview series. Following on from our last episode with Labour candidate Eoghan Murphy, I sat down with the Dublin Bay South People Before Profit candidate Brigid Purcell to talk all things housing, environmentalism, and some more Dublin Bay South specific concerns. Well, perfect, Brigid. I'm joined by you here today. Obviously, you're the People Before Profit rep for Dublin Bay South and the upcoming by-election candidate for People Before Profit. I suppose the first question I always like to ask people when they come on, because very few of the time people that will watch will be unaware sort of who the candidates are in their area, kind of what they stand for and whatnot. So if you were to say meet a constituent on the door and you were like, "Hi, I'm Brigid Purcell," how would you sort of introduce yourself to them and maybe describe your values to them?
Well, basically what I have been saying at the door is I'm Brigid Purcell. I am the candidate for People Before Profit, and most importantly, I'm a worker. I've worked the way I've pretty much made money my entire life has been through service industry jobs. I'm recently now working in an animation studio, which is wild. Finally have a job that I went to college for. That's pretty cool. But for the most part, I've since I was 14, I've been working in service industry, kitchen porter, waitress, bartender, etc., etc. I got it. I think I'm the strongest candidate on workers' rights, because I know what it's like to be, a low income worker. I know what it's like to be on minimum wage, even though you're like, but the work I do is really hard. I don't understand why I'm not compensated for that. I got into People Before Profit. When the Debenhams workers started striking. I had been a member for People Before Profit for a while. Mm-hmm. But I became an active member when the Debenhams workers were striking, because People Before Profit had a group chat that they would be like, it was the red alert group chat. So if stock was going to be taken, that's how you get in contact. That's how they would contact you. And that's how we saw, what shifts needed to be covered for the 24-hour picket. So I really became an active member through that. And then I really stand by the way their stances on workers. I think there's a huge segment of the workforce that is forgotten about, I think, and that's lower income workers, retail workers in hospitality. I mean, you can see yourself now. Younger workers are often forgotten about. I mean, you can see yourself now, like we're opening up back, society's opening up again. But most people working in the hospitality sector and like food and retail, they're younger people, and we haven't gotten our vaccines yet. There was no talk when I was working in Lidl. There was no talk of vaccines, but we were still expected to work. We're still expected to put ourselves at risk. And there's very little. And then when I got, so sorry to ramble, but when I was bartending for the first lockdown, obviously my job ended. And then when we opened up again for the end of the first lockdown, there was not a lot of precautions put in. There's the visible precautions, but then there's not a lot of actual precautions being taken place to, protect workers. And there's still no date for you and myself to be getting vaccines. So it feels sometimes as if low income workers are kind of the sacrificial lambs, we're sacrificed for the sake of the economy, and then not properly compensated for it. And that's something that I have an issue with. That's also something that People Before Profit really, is quite strong on. They're the strongest party in in terms of like standing up for workers' rights, and that's something I really believe in, and that's why I joined. That's why I'm running, to represent the workers.
Yeah.
And there you go. I hope that answered your question. I kind of went with that. Sorry.
Well, no, it definitely goes into a lot of detail anyways.
Yeah.
I want to ask specifically on, because you bring up the vaccine thing, and that's obviously going to be a big conversation.
Yeah.
I think it'll be at the background a little bit, because obviously the main centre of this stage, at least for the by-election, I think was kind of told very early on is going to be housing. You know, obviously Eoghan Murphy was the one who resigned, former housing minister. It's kind of a no-brainer at that stage. But with regards to the vaccines, you know, you're saying that, you know, younger people aren't really given this reassurance of what's going to be happening with them, especially no safety precautions really in the hospitality sector particularly. So are you would you have preferred sort of the older system of where priority workers got the vaccine, or do you think that the sort of oldest downwards vaccine approach is good, or is there something else that you had in mind?
I had issues with both. I had issues with both of the systems. Obviously, you know, the most vulnerable people had to be accommodated for. And so obviously no problem with people getting vaccinated in nursing homes, and older people, you know, the people at the most risk need to be vaccinated first. I think it was foolish to have not considered people working frontline, like to kind of take frontline workers off the kind of net, you know, I can't remember what cohort it was, but they were higher up the list than they are currently. I think that was foolish. I think there would have been an easier way to, not an easier way. It's all, I mean, I'm sure scheduling the vaccines is quite a difficult task, but if it had gone like, if you started seeing people working in vulnerable sectors also as vulnerable people, and also like meat plant workers, that's how we got like the second wave, was through meat plant workers, direct provision centers, renters who are in shared accommodation with a lot of people. Those are vulnerable people, and they should have been accounted for, and for the most part they haven't been. And I think a lot of contributing factors to the second and third and maybe fourth wave are due to that kind of lack of oversight for that kind of sector of like people who have to go into work because they can't afford to take a sick day because they're not offered sick days, and it's either you come into work or you're fired or you lose a day's pay. Those people are more likely to be transmitting COVID because they don't have an option to work from home, you know. And that was a huge oversight, and I think touch wood, we never have to go through this again. But if we were to go through this again, those people need to be protected like much sooner.
Do you not think though, like, at least in, obviously hindsight can be very helpful with regards to talking about the COVID pandemic, like, and particularly I don't think many people are fans of Stephen Donnelly when it comes to the health sector, but when we talk about like what the government could have done, do you not think that, you know, they were backed into a corner in some way with regards to how they had to, you know, start getting vaccines out there? And, you know, there's a lot of talk around, you know, particularly at the moment around patents on vaccines, the EU and their distribution of vaccines and everything else. And even, you know, in comparison to sort of third world countries who aren't getting very much, you know, vaccine doses at all, if any, you know, we're relatively well off in that sense. Do you think the government has done the best it possibly could have done given the circumstances, or?
Well, on the topic of hindsight, the World Health Organization has been telling us since SARS, I think, that we need to start preparing a plan for this. We were warned. I know it did come out of nowhere for a lot of us, but for a lot of epidemiologists, they've been talking about a huge thing like this happening fairly soon, like sooner rather than later, for a long time. And the WHO did warn us, you need to have a plan for this. Are you doing drills like they're doing in New Zealand, like they're doing in Southeast Asia, like they're doing in Australia? They kind of got over the pandemic much quicker than us because they were prepared for it, because they were doing these drills. It is on the government for not having a plan for this when they were specifically told by the WHO. You know, of course it's easy for me to say this, you know, hindsight is 2020, whatever. I accept that. But when you are warned that this is coming and you do nothing about it, it's on you that this happened, you know, or it's on you that it was as bad as it was. Also, you can take a look at, you know, not following guidelines when it comes to reopening for Christmas, when it comes to how the vaccine should be rolled out, how, you know, there's a lot of stuff that they simply didn't listen to experts on. And for the sake of reopening for Christmas, for a, you know, a meaningful Christmas, and etc., you know, and now we've lost 2,000 people because of it. I think, you know, obviously the government aren't not mind readers, psychics. They can't say what's going to happen, but they have to take accountability for that. They have to take accountability for not listening to experts who told them what was going to happen. Again, I was working in hospitality. I could have told you that was going to happen over Christmas. And I think a lot of people could have told you that was going to happen. And they just chose not to listen. And here we are. And hopefully we don't have to go through this again. I touch wood. I can't do another lockdown. I really can't. But, you know, I don't see a way out of it if we're going to continue to make the same mistakes over and over again. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And I think I'm going to move on from the topic of COVID because you'd be sick blue to the face talking about it constantly. Yeah.
I know. Anyway.
So let's talk a little bit about, obviously, Dublin Bay South as an area itself. You know, it's been described as a lot of things. I think the Irish Times described it as a Fine Gael heartland at one point. And, you know, that's easy enough to see. Last government had two elected reps, one being a minister from that area. It's previously the home of Fine Gael leader Garth Fitzgerald, but it's also, you know, the home of current Green Party leader Eamon Ryan, former Labour leaders, and also the deputy leader of Fianna Fáil. You know, PPP only managed to get about 2.5% in the last general election. How optimistic or confident are you about your chances in this by-election?
I'm surprisingly confident. I think all right, you know, our numbers weren't great the last time, but I think there's an anger now that there wasn't before. Of course, everybody's angry all the time, but I think over the government's actions during COVID, the revelations about our housing sector that kind of people weren't really aware of before, and just how horrific the housing crisis is now. I mean, the housing crisis has always been bad, and it's been going on for about 15 years. Like, it's not a new thing. Sure, I mean, Fine Gael declared an emergency 3 years ago and have yet to do anything about it, you know, do anything salient about it anyway. But there's a lot of things are bubbling up. This election is really, it's really a referendum on the current government, and I think a lot of people are extremely upset. You can see that in the polls. You can see it in the most recent Irish Times polls. We'll see. I'm confident. I think I'm tapping into a particular demographic of angry young people. And I hope that they come out and vote. I really do, because we are consistently ignored. We're consistently put on the back burner. And I'm hoping that we make our voices heard via me, you know. And yeah, that's it.
Yeah, you mentioned obviously that this not this referendum, but I suppose you could call it in some sorts. This this by-election is going to be sort of a referendum on the government, and you know, people are angry about it and this, that, and the other. But you know, last general election was very much the sort of, I suppose, for lack of a better word, the revolution of a sort of a generation speaking up against both Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. You know, and at that time as well, PPP were still on 2.5%. You know, what is it this time? Because specifically, obviously, Sinn Féin have Lynn Boylan running this campaign. Obviously, a very prominent Sinn Féin member, one that a lot of people, I think, particularly if you were to pick, say, 5 or 6, you know, recognizable representatives from Sinn Féin, she would be in there. What is it that, you know, you're appealing more to young people who might be thinking of putting Sinn Féin as their number one first preference? Why should they vote for you instead?
Well, I think I've got a good track record with working like as a worker, and participating in the plight of workers for quite a while now. Also, I mean, I'm a renter. I now, while I'm quite lucky with my situation, like it's okay. I know an awful lot of people who, who were like renovicted, that one where the landlord says, I'm doing massive renovations, and they evict you, and then you walk by the house 6 months later and you see that not a tap has happened. Or people who I've an awful lot of friends living in the area who have just horrific stories regarding landlords, both like the big commercial landlords and the smaller private landlords. There's a lot of kind of abuse happening, and it's because it's because of stuff like the RTB, really, like the Renters Tenancy Board really it's completely toothless when it comes to helping renters. It's and that's our only body that we can go to that isn't a charity, and oftentimes I've had friends tell me that they went to the RTB about this problem with their landlord, and the RTB referenced them or referred them to Threshold, the charity, because the RTB is stacked against renters. There's 40%, I think it's about 40% of the population of Dublin Bay South is renting. And if you can tap into that, if you can tell them to move their vote from Cavan to here, you live here now, there's your vote's no good in Cavan, you haven't been there in 6 years. If you can tap into that, I think you can tap into you're tapping into 40% of the population of this constituency. So I do, and I think I'm strong on rental policies. I think people before profit are strong on our rental policies. And you can take a look at we were the ones pointing out that there's going to be there's the potential of a double hike in rent increases to 8% because the government just didn't think that would happen. It's that's €140 a month on the average rent in Dublin. That's just tagged onto your rent now. Other parties weren't bringing that up. We brought that up, and I think that resonates with people. I hope so anyway. And if you're out there, give me your number one. But always be closing. That's it. That's me.
We talk a little bit about renting there, and we mentioned earlier that this by-election has obviously replaced Eoghan Murphy, who's former housing minister. I think I read recently that the average rent in Dublin Bay South is around $2,000 a month, which is ridiculous for anyone, especially, as you mentioned, young people trying to get into the housing market, unless they're going to be sharing, and even at that stage you're still paying extortionate prices. If we're to look at, say, if you are elected and you're with People for Profit, I believe 5 TDs at the moment, to be 6 if you're elected, what is sort of the achievements you're hoping to bring forward within this government cycle, not only in the housing vicinity, but overall as a party group?
Well, let's see. Okay, well, number one, let's take a look at housing. I'll start with housing. It is the big one. My big thing is banning vulture funds. I don't think they have any place in our housing sector. They have proven that all they do is, inflate housing prices here. If you arraign my area in particular, there's a huge amount of luxury apartments that are just left dormant, because building those means that the rest of your investment portfolio increases in price, which means that you can charge more rent and you can increase rent on your current portfolio. So it does pay to continue to build and leave apartments empty. So we want to ban those outright. They did it in New Zealand. We can do it here. Again, during the pandemic, there was a lot of comparisons between ourselves and New Zealand. We're not that different. We even have the same climate. So if they can do it in New Zealand, we can do it here. They've done it in Berlin. It's not impossible. They're a recent addition to our housing sector. We don't need them. They cause us nothing but heartache. The other one is I will be pushing for not only a rent freeze, but actual rent control, real rent control. If we want to be able to, put forth a policy where if you're paying more than a third of your income to housing or for rent, that you'll be able to complain to a independent kind of board, similar to the RTB, but actually functioning. So a functioning RTB that will ensure that your rent is put in line with being no more than a third of your income. Currently, most people are paying 40-50% of their income. If people my age are paying 40-50% of their income on rent, which is insane. Like, how else, that's like, how can you save for a house? How can you even have like the luxury of, I don't know, a night out once a month, twice a month, if half of your income is going towards rent, like, on top of that, we want to get mortgages. We want the mortgage rate to be the same as, well, that's more for homeowners, but we want mortgage rates to be the same as the EU. We're paying twice the EU average on mortgage rates for no reason. That's €80,000 on top of the house. Like, so not only do we have the most expensive housing prices in Europe, but also on top of that, we were paying an additional €80,000 on mortgage rates that does not need to be there. Let me see what else. I've got notes here and I've burned through my housing notes. We want to establish, we want to push for all public land to be used for public or affordable housing, and affordable being affordable, tied to your income, not €450,000. Like, that's not affordable. That's not affordable. We want that. I have absolutely no interest in the LDA, because they are just handing back land to the developers that sold off the land to make these, vulture fund properties, or the Johnny Ronans, or the Oak Tree Capitals. Like, the LDA cannot be trusted with our public land. It's our most precious resource, and we can't just hand it over to the open market. We need to be keeping that we needed to keep it in public ownership to build public and affordable housing. I'll move on from housing, although I could talk forever about it. I guess another big thing, obviously, like I went on for ages about it, workers' rights. We want to we need the Debenhams bill to be passed. Mick Barry put forth the Debenhams bill. It's got a longer title, but it's not coming to me at the moment. That the government voted to push back a year before they have to vote on it, which means that there is a year for other corporations to go exactly the same way the Debenhams did, abandoning all their staff, going back on promises that they made them. And ultimately, when a company goes into liquidation, the workers need to be the first liquidator, not KPMG, not other entities. Like, it has to be the workers that are the first creditor. They need to be first on the list to be paid out when a company goes into liquidation. We need to get the Cahill-Duffy report signed. It's been sitting on a desk since Cleary's. It's been sitting on a desk gathering dust. Nobody's signing it. All that needs to happen is for that bill to be signed, and that would sort out a lot of the problems that happened. A lot of the things that caused Debenhams to happen. That needs to be signed. We need €15. We need a €15 living wage. I don't think I need to defend that. I think the cost of living in Dublin is $11.90. Minimum wage is $10.20, and I don't think it's, you should be able to live comfortably if you're working. If you're working full time. Everybody deserves to be able to live with a security, so that you're not constantly worrying about Jesus, if I'm sick or if I'm out of work, because I've been there, when you're like, oh God, if I'm sick for a week, that's a week of pay that I don't have. That means that I'm going to have to start moving money around just to kind of get through to the end of the month. That's a really horrific way to live your life. And I don't think anybody should have to go through that. So I want a €15 minimum wage or living wage.
Just can I ask you on that just quickly while we're on it? Just with regards to the living wage, do you want the living wage to be a sort of a proportion of what it would cost to live in that area, or is it €15 the standard overall?
€15 standard. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Sick pay. We were just talking about sick pay for ages. Sorry, I was talking about sick pay for ages. The amount of places that I've worked where I did not get sick pay is it's too many. It's too many. And for a lot of places, sick pay comes with caveats. So you don't get sick pay unless you're a year into the job, which means that you can't be sick for a whole year because you'll lose out on pay. I know, like, that's not, people get sick. That's a thing that happens. And just because you get sick doesn't mean that you should miss out on pay just because you haven't been at a job for a year. You can't tell when, or, as we've seen in the past year, you can't help getting sick. Like, it's just something that's going to happen. It's an inevitability for everyone. You're going to get sick eventually, and you deserve to have a decent sick pay scheme. And we don't have that at the moment. It's not mandatory. A company doesn't have to give you sick pay. It's, a perk. In what universe is sick pay a perk? On top of that, another one that I'll throw in, full paid maternity leave, as opposed to what we get at the moment, and not from the state, from your employer. You should be getting full paid maternity leave from your employer. We're one of the only countries that doesn't do that. And it's, why? Why? I guess I could go on to the I feel like I'm talking an awful lot. I'm sorry.
I have questions on the environment if you want to keep that for the moment.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, because specifically, obviously, Eamon Ryan was elected on the first count in this constituency last time. So obviously there is a big Green vote here. Now, there's deliberations as to whether it's a Green vote based on I suppose, what would you call it? The liberalisation of, of environmentalism. So like very much like, we don't use our, plastic straws or whatnot, like, which is kind of important, but like not in the grand scheme of things. And then there's deliberations as to whether it's more this sort of eco-socialist vote. And, particularly I want to say, because when you talk about big national issues, they can often be always condensed into smaller internal issues. And one of that, for a perfect example, is probably environmentalism has been, condensed into the sort of the topics surrounding Dublin Bay.
Yeah.
And obviously you were at protests regarding Dublin Bay as well. And, I want to ask, because there is such a heavy Eamon Ryan level vote there, do you think that you'll be able to garner votes off him? Because I mean this in no harsh way, or I presume you won't take it in a harsh way either, but I don't see that there's a lot of overlap between yourself and Eamon Ryan.
I think from what I've seen with this constituency, a lot of people, they voted in the Greens because they genuinely thought that this is going to, I'm concerned about the environment, I'm concerned about climate change, and they're putting themselves across as being, the party for opposing climate change. And I'm heartbroken that they were so betrayed. I really am. Particularly the people in my constituency. Particularly Eamon Ryan's constituency, considering that we have like you were saying earlier, the likes of the Ringsend water treatment plant. As somebody who purports to have green values, Eamon Ryan should have been looking out for that for a long time. For much sooner than, he should have been moving on that. He hasn't. He's kind of said nothing about it, and as a result, we're seeing 74 swimming pools of human waste pumped into the bay, which is a UNESCO protected biosphere, and it's the only one in Europe that has a capital city in it. Like, it's important. And also in this constituent, I'm sorry to be harping on about the pollution in Dublin Bay, but it's something that really matters to me. There's no public swimming pools in this area at the moment. Markovich baths have closed. Marion Pool has closed. you have to join a gym to be able to access the pool. But you know what we do have? We have the sea. Except every time you swim in the sea, you get sick. You know, it's not an option. And obviously people are becoming more aware that, like, oh, exercise is actually something that really helps my mental health. And, you know, it's something that is very important because we couldn't do it for ages, aside from walking around our 5Ks. And the sea really is it's one of our greatest resources. You know, it's amazing. Like to live here, to get the opportunity to live beside the sea is really, it's great. It's a shame that it's being treated so badly. And you know, not even, you know, this kind of myopic idea of the sea, or, you know, it's the fact that, like, you can't even swim in it without getting, you know, diarrhea and vomiting. Like, it's actively harming our health. And the fact that, you know, people have been calling this out for a long time and they have effectively been ignored, you know, it breaks my heart. I think it's absolutely horrific. And we're just being told to sit tight and wait until 2025, when who knows, who knows how bad it's going to get. Like, the population is ever increasing. That's a good thing. But it also puts pressure on our urban wastewater treatment. And there's no talks of improving that infrastructure, aside from what Irish Water said was going to happen in 2020, and then it never did, you know? There's a lot of broken promises, and I understand that people are upset about it. I'm upset about it as well. And I think I've proven that I'm a better environmentalist than many of the Greens. I reject data centers. They're like, the fact they're turning our electric grid upside down to make these data centers that then kind of don't pay, they don't pay tax, and they've have to open Money Point up again to provide enough electricity. Like, there's, you know, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And you know, I'm willing to call that out. The Greens bill says nothing. Their new bill that they just launched, the climate change one, or the climate action bill, says nothing about data centers. It says nothing about, it relies too heavily on future technology that doesn't exist. Like, come up with solutions now. Don't be relying on technology that is just in your brains at the moment. It doesn't exist. So why is that being included in a bill? Like, we need solutions now. This idea of waiting till 2030, this idea of waiting till 2050, when you and I now, I don't know how you feel about like green stuff, but like, we don't have that much time. Like, we don't have that much time to turn things around. We need action now. And this idea of waiting for 10 years and relying on future technology, it makes no sense. And I don't think it's an appropriate solution.
Yeah, 100%. And one topic on that, you mentioned the sort of the betrayal that a lot of Green voters will have felt by sort of Eamon Ryan. I suppose linked in some way to him joining the government. I would say that some of them probably aren't too worried about that, but more so on the sort of environmental issues. You know, we've seen recently that there's a new sort of eco-socialist Green Party that was formed. Are you, and this kind of ties into my next question as well, with regards to the amount of left-wing parties that are running in this by-election in comparison to, say, I think you've got, I think, three right-wing parties, arguably four, and some might say five if they want to include Labour in there, but that's a whole different story. You know, there's a lot of left-wing parties running, and if this Eco-Socialist Party also decides to run a candidate, are you worried about the split in the vote that this will cause, and that it will, you know, ultimately probably lead to, you know, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, maybe possibly Labour as well, getting that seat ahead of some of the other further left-wing candidates?
I'm not. No, I'm not. I think we need to focus. I think, you know, vote left, transfer left was fairly effective, not effective enough in the last election. But like, think if we push that again, we could have a good a great turnout. But I mean, I would argue that there is not that many true left parties. You know, a lot of these parties that purport to be left also have a history of austerity, which is not a leftist value. It's not pro-working class, it's anti-working class. It's just leaving people behind. Austerity never helped anyone, aside from bankers and those in government, to make nice with the EU. I think to call yourself a left party and then be pro-austerity and talk about property taxes when, you know, that's just an additional tax on ordinary people. It's a tax on the family home. And why should you be punished for buying a home when we've all been brought up, told that is something that needs to happen? Why should you be punished for a market that you can't control? Why should you be punished for where you live? Why should you be punished for, it makes no sense to me. It makes absolutely no sense to me why people would focus on that. And sorry, I think I'm getting away from your question. Anyway, I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about it. I think if we focus on transfer left or vote left, transfer left, I think it's grand. I think, listen, if by all means, if people want to join People Before Profit and bolster the left wing, sure.
But I want to ask on that, because I think what I'm getting from you is, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but like you're mentioning that there's parties that would, you know, appear to espouse left-wing values, but, you know, once you kind of dig a little deeper, kind of aren't really, you know, kind of putting their actions with what they say. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes.
Yeah. You know, Dublin Bay South is the richest constituency in Dublin, which I think I'm going to presume makes it the richest constituency in the country. Like, the large proportion of the voter base there are probably not that they're not going to be worried about austerity measures, but it probably won't affect them. So is that really that sort of idea, is that going to get through to them as much, do you think?
I would argue that while Dublin Bay South is one of the wealthiest constituencies, it also has huge pockets of poverty. It has huge pockets of poverty. We have huge, we have 40%, 40-ish% of the people living here are renting. They're affected by austerity. We have a huge amount of the population who are living in like council estates and council housing. They're affected by austerity. We have an awful lot of we have a huge amount of low income workers, and they are affected by austerity. I think that Dublin Bay South has gotten the impression that it's an extremely wealthy area, but there is a huge gap between those who have and those who haven't. And that's why I'm running. It's because, for the most part, we get represented by people who represent one side of the constituency, when there is such a huge side of the constituency that does not get adequate representation. And that's why I'm here.
I think I want to add on, you probably tracked this already, but I'll run through it one more time just to kind of get an idea. You know, there was a lot of talk at the beginning, even before Sinn Féin had named a candidate, they were kind of promoting this idea that this is an election between Sinn Féin and Fine Gael. Is that damaging, sort of, because you didn't really hear that from the sort of previous element in the last round election of vote left, transfer left? It was kind of more of a unity based approach, I want to say, although that kind of fleets now and then with the left wing parties. You know, in this election, there wasn't really that sort of same, arm held out to other parties like, come on, we need to try and, beat the two big ones. I suppose now that it's kind of a null term given the rise of Sinn Féin. But are you disappointed that there is this sort of, this sort of definitive sort of stance from both Fine Gael and Sinn Féin with regards to how this election is being fought?
Well, I'm not disappointed about it. If they think that's how the election's gonna go, sure. Listen, I'll be much happier with Lynn Boylan in in the Dáil than the alternative. But I also believe that I am a better candidate. I believe I'm the best candidate for this area, and I wouldn't be running if I didn't think that. Listen, I'm gunning for it. I am canvassing every night, and we're gunning for it. And there's a lot of support behind me, and I do think I'm the best candidate. But I wouldn't be about like she's a very good candidate. I'm the better candidate. She's a very good candidate.
Yeah, well, I suppose only time will tell with this by-election, and there's definitely a lot of time left until July 8th. We'll round it off, I suppose, finally, and it's just kind of a summary piece. If you could kind of maybe give quickly maybe a maximum 1 minute, because I know you've a load of stuff, maximum of 1 minute maybe just to kind of sell yourself to the voters, kind of what is it that you are mainly prioritising this election, both on a national and a local scale, and what do you think you can add if elected?
Okay, I'll start telling myself now. I'm Brigid Purcell. I'm running in the election for People Before Profit. I think what makes me different is that I am an out and out socialist. I am a fighter. This is my first time running. I'm not a careerist politician. I thought I was going to be bartending forever. I come from a background of low income work. I know what it's like to have to kind of scramble to figure out, working 2 jobs because, one of your jobs is giving you weird hours, and it's February and nobody comes into the bar on February. So, you're down to 19 hours this week. And then you have to try to figure it out on that. I know what that's like. I know what it's like to rent. I know, I think I'm strong on things that like affect people who aren't currently represented. I'm young. I'm a worker. I'm a socialist. I rent. I know what people are going through because I go through it myself. And I think if you're sick, if people are sick of looking at the Dáil and being like, if you're getting disappointed every time at the votes that are happening, like sealing the mother and baby reports, what happened with the Debenhams ladies, the refusal to expel the Israeli ambassador, if you're looking at that and it's upsetting you, it's because you're not being represented properly. And this is an opportunity to get somebody like you, who thinks like you, who's in the same position that you are, into the Dáil. And it's an additional left voice that we desperately need, and that's only a good thing. So that's my pitch.
Perfect. Well, Brigid Purcell, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you enjoyed this interview and you'd like to see more, make sure to subscribe to the channel to keep up to date with all future uploads. With that being said, my name is Odhrán and you've been watching Media.wmv's Dublin Bay South by-election interview series.